Here is someone who I think will agree with me. Senator Marco Rubio from Florida joins us now. Senator, thanks for being here. This breach has really caught fire. We got the guy behind it. How much damage has been done from what we know?
Well, that's the question we need to be asking. I mean, we've seen the public damage, right, where allies have gotten uncomfortable about it. We can speculate as to some of the damage. But what the real damage I'll be looking for is, we don't just rely on our intelligence. We have a lot of partners around the world that share intelligence with us. And I want to see how that starts to apply here, whether they start sharing with us. But we've entered this era. We should have expected this a long time ago. We live in the look at me era where everybody, it's not enough to just take a trip somewhere around the world, right? Everybody, if you don't capture pictures and post it on Instagram, it never happened. It's like you never went there. And so I think that's become a very unfortunate, normal part of our culture today. And it reminds me a lot of these cases you hear about paramedics respond to horrible accidents, take pictures of victims just to share with their buddies. In this case, it was posted online by a 21-year-old guy. It doesn't sound like he's a spy for any country. He was trying to show off to his friends, but you've seen the damage that it's done. So this is going to require, I think, a pretty comprehensive evaluation, not just of how we classify things, but how they're compartmented, how people have access to it, how we secure it. And obviously, the distribution on some of these things is hundreds and hundreds of people. In this case, an IT guy on top of it.
Right. Senator, we don't get much communication from the White House. The president's in Ireland just puttering around visiting countrysides. They don't even let him do anything but a sentence to say it's not a big deal. Very similar to the spy balloon, not a big deal. Is this a big deal?
It is. I mean, it's a big deal in the fact that we've had to, if it wasn't a big deal, why did the defense secretary have to call his counterparts around the world, the secretary of state as well? I imagine our intelligence officials have had to do the same. This downplaying of this stuff, if it's not a big deal, why did the FBI go raid the guy's home and arrest him in an armored vehicle? It is a big deal. We have a separate problem related to this, and that is we have a president of the United States who cannot communicate effectively. He cannot communicate with the American public. He can't communicate with the world. So they sort of have him in this bunker where they don't let him speak too often off the cuff. Every time he does, he says things that embarrass, I think, the administration. So on top of everything else, we have a fundamental problem in that we have a chief executive in our country who simply cannot effectively communicate without creating ancillary problems for the administration and for the country.
Speaking of intelligence, it looks like you guys on the Intelligence Committee are going to get the Pence documents, the Trump documents, or a summary of what was by President Biden's Corvette and all these other places. What happened at the University of Delaware, what was in his lawyer's office, and what was in Rehoboth or anywhere else. I understand your staffs have gotten through it. What do they tell you? What do you expect this week?
Well, right now we've only gotten a portion of it, and it's all about what they call read and return. We can read it, but we have to give it back. Understand something. The stuff we're reviewing, none of it as to date is highly classified. It's all stuff we would have had access to in the past. We just don't know which parts of it is. We're not in. Our job is not to oversee the criminal justice investigation. Our job is to see, okay, what was out there, who saw it, what damage, if any, did that cause, and what are you in the intelligence community doing to mitigate that damage and to prevent this from happening in the future? There's no way we can conduct that kind of oversight if we don't know what these documents were or who saw them. And so our job is to oversee how the intelligence community is behaving and whether they're doing enough to protect us if there was any damage. So we can't do that if they don't share. So this is an untenable position. Thankfully, it's a bicameral, bipartisan insistence on seeing it. I think we're going to get there, but it's taken a lot of work. And, it's very frustrating when the media leaks know more about this case and the documents than members of Congress that are charged with oversight have access to.
I got to amend that. We know a lot about the investigation into the Trump Mar-a-Lago documents, know almost nothing about the investigation of President Biden. Real quick, your state this week has a supermajority, decided to knock abortion down, legal abortion down from 15 weeks to 6 weeks. I know you're pro-life. That pleases you personally. But is that where the state is? Is that where the country is?
Well, these are the elected representatives of the state. Every member of that House will have to run in 2 years or less than 2 years. Every member of the Senate will have to run at some point over the next 4. The governor was just elected. I think most of our statewide leaders of all, if not all, have all campaigned on being pro-life. This is a pro-life legislature that was elected, not appointed, not put there. And so voters will make that decision. Ultimately, as I said, I mean, that ultimately was what the Supreme Court ruled last year, is that this was an issue that could be regulated at the state level. And that's what Florida's doing. I imagine other states will have different laws. I imagine the laws in New York and California are going to be very different than the laws in Florida. Right. But that's the way our republic works.
And if